In this chapter, we look into how just by respecting diversity, we can achieve huge profits and incredible benefits from the natural energy flows. By respecting diversity means to include not only biodiversity, but also diversity of place and culture. This means, for example, engaging with an abundance of diverse materials, options, and responses of creative and elegant solutions. The fittest survive, the fittingest thrive. Popular wisdom says the fittest survive, but in a healthy natural system, it's the fittingest who thrive. Fittingest implies something that fits in the place, with an energetic engagement and interdependent relationship. Think again of the ants. Being fitting, ants do not work to destroy competing species. Rather, they compete productively from their niches and use resources within an ecosystem. Over millions of years, ants have evolved to fit with their particular local, developing features and behaviors they need. The vitality of ecosystems depend on relationship between species, their uses, and exchanges of materials and energy in a given space. The more diversity there is, the more productive functions for the ecosystem is performed. Every creature is involved in maintaining the entire system, and each inhabitant of an ecosystem is therefore interdependent to some extent with the others. A small disturbance of this ecosystem means an ecosystem becomes less stable, less able to withstand natural catastrophe, and less able to stay healthy. All sustainability is local. We know the human systems and industries are fitting only when we understand the total meaning of all sustainability is local. This means connecting to local material and energy flows and local customs, needs, and tastes from the molecular level to the level of the region itself. This includes considering the effects of the chemicals we use in the local water and soil, understanding the product we are using, the surrounding in which it is made, how we can create meaningful occupation and enhance the region's economic and physical health, and finally, how we can acquire biological and technical wealth for the future. This would enhance that particular community in several ways. The homes were built from local materials that were biologically and technically reusable. Employing these materials and the services of nearby craftsmen would generate local economic activity and support as many residents as possible. It would involve local people in building the community and keep them connected to the region's cultural heritage. Additionally, using local materials opens the doors to profitable local enterprise. It also avoids the problem of bio-invasion. When a transfer of materials from one region to another introduces invasive, non-native species to fragile ecosystem. By seeing sustainability as both a local and global event, we can understand that it's not viable to poison local water and air with waste, and it's equally unacceptable to send it downstream or to ship it to overseas to other countries. Connecting to natural energy flows. With new technologies and the use of fossil fuels, the Industrial Revolution made humans no longer dependent on natural force. As a result, modern homes, buildings, and factories, even whole cities, became so disconnected from natural energy flows. A renewed connection to natural flows will help us make use of existing local renewable energy flows, while more optimized solutions are being developed and implemented. In some cases, solar, wind, and water power can be channeled into the current system of energy supplies. In a long run, connecting to natural energy flows is a matter of re-establishing our fundamental connection to the source of all good growth on the planet. For example, the sun. Even at such distance, it commands healthy circumstances that make natural energy flows possible. Humans thrive on the earth under such intense heat and light only because billions of years of evolutionary processes have created the atmosphere and surface that support our existence lives on Earth. So, re-establishing our connection to the sun includes maintaining interdependence with all other ecological circumstances that make natural energy flows possible in the first place. A transition to diverse and renewing energy flows. Similar to the diversity, a distributed industry makes a resilient system for both providers and customers. And from an eco-effective perspective, the greatest innovations in energy supply are being made by small-scale plants at the local level. The shorter distances reduce the power lost in high-voltage transmission to insignificant levels. With smaller utilities, it becomes possible to harness waste heat to feed local needs. Rather than installing more large-scale power-generating equipment to meet peak energy loads, utility companies can integrate solar collectors as products of service with systems currently in use. Or imagine having an intelligent appliance that receives information about the current price of power along with the power itself, and you get to choose from alternative power sources accordingly, like a broker instructed to sell or buy according to the rise and fall of given stock price. Wouldn't that be great? In this way, your appliance could decide according to your criteria when to buy power and when to use the restored cooling system until demand and price come down. Another great possible example would be a thermostat that can be placed near employees, not in the equipment up near the roof. This way, people are heating or cooling small area as needed instead of whole floor itself. What would be the cherry on the cake is to combine such a system with a grass roof to protect it from heat gain in summer, wind loss in the winter, and the wear and tear of daylight. Reap the wind. Wind power offers similar possibilities for hybrid systems that make more effective use of local resources. From an eco-effective perspective, however, the design of conventional wind power plants is not always optimal. The new wind farms are huge, as many as 100 windmills grouped, each of them producing 1 megawatt of electricity with a blade length of a football field. Also, modern wind fields are not designed as technical nutrients with ecologically intelligent materials. In this case, what we can do is to distribute windmills on every few family farms. As with solar collectors, utility companies could lease land from the farmers for this purpose, distributing the power they generate in a way that optimizes existing power lines and requires a few new ones. The farmers get much needed supplemental income, and the utility company gets to reap the power which it adds to the grid. Ultimately, we want to be designing processes and products that not only return the biological and technical nutrients they use, but pay back with interest the energy they consume. A diversity of needs and desires. Respecting diversity in design means considering not only how a product is made, but also how it is being used and by whom. In a cradle-to-cradle concept, it should have many uses and many users over time. An office building or store, for example, should be designed so that it can be adapted to different users over many generations, instead of built for one specific purpose and torn down later. In industrial areas, polymers can be designed as food for more bottles with an appropriately designed upcycling infrastructure. Imagine designing such packaging that safely biodegrades after use. It could be made from the empty rice stalks that are left in the fields after harvest, which are now usually burned. Instead of feeling guilty and burdened when they are finished eating, people could enjoy throwing their safe and healthy package out onto the ground, where it could quickly decompose and provide nitrogen to the soil. Form follows evolution. Instead of promoting a one-size-fits-all concept, industries can design in the potential for mass customization, allowing packaging and products to be adapted to local taste and tradition. Luxury industries like fashion and cosmetics have been forward in allowing for customization to individual tastes and local customs. Eco-effective design demands a coherent set of principles based on nature's law and the opportunity for constant diversity of expression. As we have pointed out in Chapter 3, soap, as it is currently manufactured, is designed to work the same way in every imaginable location and ecosystem. Faced with the questionable effects of such a design, eco-efficiency advocates might ask a manufacturer, why this packaging in the first place? Why these ingredients? Why liquid? And why one size fits all? Soap manufacturers could retain local packaging and shipping. For example, shipping water increases transportation expenses and is unnecessary since there is water in the washing machine, laundry, tub, river or lake where the washing is done. Maybe soap could be delivered in pellet or powder form and sold in bulk at the grocery store. With given the opportunity, people choose diversity because it brings them more pleasure and delight. In fact, the furious clash of cultural diversity can broaden perspective and inspire creative change. A tapestry of information. Traditionally, companies have relied on feedback for signals that influence change. But how about consulting feed forward, asking what will work in the future? How can we design things in keeping with that vision? How will sustaining goal commerce look like in 10 or even 100 years from now? What can we do now to begin the process of industrial re-evolution? If that laundry detergent manufacturer continued to think in this direction, it would move beyond the question of creating a detergent that's convenient to use and be gentle on human hands and not be harmful to aquatic life at the same time. After we know what kind of soap the customers want, what kind of soap the river wants, we have to think about how the packaging can be designed so that it will be readily biodegrade on the riverbank. One by one, the elements of a product might be redefined positively against an ever-widening backdrop until the product itself evolves and every aspect is designed to nourish a diverse world. Respecting diversity means widening the scope of input too, to accept a broader range of ecological and social context and a long temporal framework. A diversity of isms. Capitalism, socialism, culturalism, sexism, or racism. There are many isms that have heavily influenced human history up to now. Sometimes people have their own biased opinions, because of which they often become extremist, promoting troublesome, low-tech, and impossibly expensive design and policies. Promoting diversity means becoming open-minded and accepting changes that the sustainable world needs. In the process of doing so, at various stages, we sometimes have to make a decision that engages multiple interested factors. To make the process of engaging the various issues less abstract, as a guidance, the fractal triangle is suggested as a visualization tool. It is a simple triangle considering the impact of economy, equity, and ecology together. Starting with the extreme lower right corner, which represents the economy, money becomes the priority here. And the questions we ask would certainly include, can I make a profit with my product or service? In the economic equity sector, we have to consider both profitability and fairness, asking, are employees producing a promising product earning a living wage? Moving into the equity economy sector, the emphasis shifts more towards fairness so that we can see the economy through the lens of equity. Here, we might ask, are men and women being paid the same for the same work? In the extreme equity corner, the questions are purely social. For example, are people treating each other with respect? This is where we discuss issues such as racism or sexism. Moving to equity ecology sector, the emphasis shifts again. Here the question might be, is it fair to expose workers or customers to toxins in the workplace? In the ecology equity sector, the emphasis is more on how this product is going to affect future generations' health. If it is fair to pollute a river or poison the air. Now going to the ecology sector, are we obeying nature's law? Does waste equal food? Then on to ecology economy, where money enters the frame again. The questions we often ask here are, is our ecological economically fecund tool? Are we designing a building that harnesses solar flows to make more energy than it needs to operate? Finally, economy ecology sector. This is where eco-efficiency is coming from, where we find people trying to be less bad, do more with less while continuing to work within existing economic paradigm. Our main interest here are the interest of commerce and the environment should not be inherently in conflict. The triple top line. The conventional design criteria are a tripod: cost, aesthetic, and performance. This means we are prepared to answer, can we profit from it? Will the customer find it attractive? And will it work? This triple bottom line approach is based on the tripod of ecology, equity, and economy. This approach has had a major positive effect on incorporating sustainability concerns into corporate accountability. But in reality, we often find that big decisions are based solely on economic consideration, with social or ecological benefits considered as less important rather than given equal weight at the outset. Businesses calculate their conventional economic profitability and add to that what they perceive to be the social benefits, with perhaps some reduction in environmental damage, such as lower emissions, fewer materials sent to a landfill, or reduced materials in the product itself. But if businesses are not using triple bottom line analysis as a strategic design tool, they are missing a rich opportunity. An industrial re-evolution. Inventive machines that use the mechanisms of nature instead of harsh chemicals, concrete, or steel are a step in the right direction. The new technologies do not create industrial revolutions themselves, unless we change their context. Even today, most cutting-edge environmental approaches still lead to the slow destruction of the natural world, while we sustain the current industrial system of production and consume for a few hundred years more. Natural systems take from their environment, but they also give something back. Remember our cherry tree? It blossoms, provides food to plants, animals and humans, makes oxygen, and finally nutrients to microorganisms. We follow their path to create a more inspiring partnership with nature. We can build the factories whose products and byproducts nourish the ecosystem with biodegradable materials and recirculate technical materials instead of dumping, burning, or burying them. We can design the systems that regulate themselves. Instead of using nature as a mere tool for human purposes, we can strive to become tools of nature because we have the right system, a creative, prosperous, intelligent, and fertile system. Thank you for listening. The next and final chapter of the Cradle to Cradle book is Putting Eco-Effectiveness into Practice.